No, the aliens aren't coming. What you just heard was a simulation of a condition that exists today. It's existed for a long while, but the problem is it's becoming more prevalent as our generation grows and new generations come in. This condition is called tinnitus, and it's ringing in the ears. Imagine this debilitating ringing day and night, and you can't stop it. You got it, you can't stop it. You're asking, give me some peace, give me some quiet, but you can't get it anymore because of some bad decisions you've made. Now, sometimes it can be an accident. It could be a factory accident. It could be maybe something you got at the war. But many times it's because of ignorance that we suffer through this. So, I represent the Kazakov Foundation for Better Hearing tonight. And our mission is to impart knowledge and education to people on hearing and their auditory sense, and to give them tools which will allow them to prevent conditions such as this one and make sure that they can still hear as they get older. So, before we start, today the issue that we're going to deal with is noise-induced hearing loss. Now, there's a lot of hearing loss, I agree. There's many ways to get it. There's genetics, there's disease that you can get it, but one of the most common ways to get hearing loss is through the noise-induced hearing loss. Now, before we get into that, how does that happen? Well, there's two ways this happens. One, you're exposed to a very loud sound for a short period of time. Or two, you're exposed to a moderately loud sound for a longer period of time. So it's a balance between exposure and the sound volume. So what happens? Well, our ears are very interesting instruments. What happens is there's waves, right? Everywhere. Waves pass through air, they pass through water, they pass through matter. Well, as these waves enter the ear, they become something that's called the sound pressure. And they enter the inner ear in a place called the cochlea, and then there's little hair particles in that cochlea. Those hair particles are responsible for the frequency of sound that you hear. We humans, we hear from 2,000 hertz all the way to 20,000 hertz. It's a large frequency of sounds. Now, when that pressure goes in, it touches one of those hair cells, and that hair cell fires an electrical impulse to your brain that tells your brain, this is how that sounds. That's how you hear me right now. It's mechanically and through electrical impulses. When you hear the sound itself is measured, the loudness is measured in something we call decibels. Now, decibels is a little bit weird way of measuring sound because it's not linear. It's logarithmic, so it's not quite intuitive. But there's a couple of rule of thumbs. For every increase of 10 in decibels, the perception of sound to us humans doubles. So if you go from 80 decibels to 90 decibels, the sound is just doubled. So let's bring it back all together. What's the problem? Well, the problem is loud sound and exposure. It's the balance between those two that creates damage. For us to understand this, let's go ahead and take a look at what decibels represent. Let us get a better grasp of the nebulous definition of decibels. So, if we take a look at this chart over here, we have activity, decibel value, and exposure time. Let's take a look at the activity and decibel value. Just the breathing. It's very quiet, only 10 decibels. If you're in a library, it's about 40 decibels. If you're at the office and there's chatter going on, it's about 60 decibels. Vacuum cleaner goes up to 70 decibels. Now remember, this is doubling in the perception of sound every time you go by 10. How about 80? What's 80? Well, that's a freight train about 50 feet away. That's the way they described it. If you go to 90, it's louder. It's a blender that's right next to you, or also truck traffic. You know how loud those diesel engines are. If you go even louder, which we hear, live rock music is at about 100 to 110 decibels. And a chainsaw is 115. And finally, 150 decibels is where your eardrum punctures. So how does how does it happen? How does the hearing loss occur? Well, fairly easy. What happens is the waves go into your ear and they pretty much smash those hairs in the cochlea. And they're smashed so many times that after a while they just continue firing. They fire, 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 and they don't stop firing, sending impulses to your brain. Now, we talked about exposure. How much exposure could you have to sound? Well, if it's below 80, really a lot of exposure. But we measure it in hours per day. If you take a look at a freight train, 80 decibels, you have about 8 hours that you could be exposed to this sound before hearing damage occurs. To something like a blender or truck traffic, you only have 2 hours. Notice how the exposure time radically decreased. Look at a rock concert. Without ear protection, look at a rock concert, 0.25. That's 15 minutes unprotected at about 100 decibels. Exactly. So the reason I'm here today is because we as a society today, I don't think do a good enough job at educating ourselves how important hearing is. We see this all the time. Kids go to concerts and they stay right next to the big speakers, and they come out here and they hear ringing. Anybody ever heard ringing after a big concert? Right? Nightclub? It's cool, right? I bet you didn't know that was permanent damage to your ear, did you? Yeah, it is. You hear ringing after permanent damage to your ear. Continue doing that, and you might get tinnitus in the future. So, my thing today is, not to make you sad, but it's to tell you how you can prevent things like this from happening. And it's very simple, okay? It's better than paying for hearing loss in the future. What you can do, when you're going to bars, concerts, and I do this all the time, earplugs. Now there's two kinds. You see these in stores. These are your good old foam earplugs. They're nice and they protect up to 32 decibels. That means if you're at a concert at 100 decibels, you'll be at about 70 when the noise goes into your ear. The problem is these muffle your sound, so you don't hear very well. When you say, this makes the music really uncomfortable. And they look kind of goofy, don't they? Here's another solution. I've been using this for about 3-4 years now. These are called Edomotics ER20s. These are musicians' earplugs. They're different because they allow the whole range of sound into your ears. But what they do is they just lower the volume by 12 decibels. You can go to a concert and put these in, and you hear everybody very well, and you even hear your friends talk, unlike these ones right over here. And they don't look goofy because you have a clear tip ending at the end. Most importantly, you don't get ringing when you come out. So, in the future, really, I'd recommend this. And plus, they're on Amazon and they're only $10. $10 for your future investment. So you don't have to say what when you're older. They come in a little keychain. Put the keychain on your keys. I mean, how heavy is this to carry? Wherever you go, you have them. Put the extra foam ones inside this little case as well, because your friend's going to ask you and say, oh, the music's too loud, let me have some. Give them the foam ones. Whenever you're working with tools, chainsaws, you're working with woodworking at home, you're cutting your lawn, you're going to a concert, a bar, realize that most of the DJs are deaf today. That's why they turn on the music so loud. It's because they think it's not loud anymore. But it's a serious issue. And I hope this imparts some knowledge to you. And in the future, remember that it's better to take care of your ears today so you don't end up saying, what? In the future. And whenever you have time, give this information to some of your friends. Brought to you by Kazakov Foundation. Thank you.